This is a Dr. Z JAZ 4020, which is a model I'm not familiar with, but based on the board layout and amps I've had in the past, I suspect that it is a variation on the MAZ 38 reverb. The owner wanted to know if the reverb could be made deeper and maybe have an effects loop added to it, besides the passive one that's in here. It's got a passive loop, but he wants to know if I can install an active loop. I'll look at that once I know what else the amp needs. The reverb works. The rest of the amp sounds okay, except the reverb just doesn't go to surf levels. It's stronger than many Dr. Z reverbs, and it's not as noisy, but I think I can get it stronger and deeper. But before I do all that, some previous techs have tried to improve this amp, and the owner was charged for their work, which makes me sad, because that is just really unacceptably shitty work. Really bad solder joints, people not using the right heat, not having the right value parts, so they do things like that with the parallel resistors. And why? I guess they changed their mind about that cap and they left it in. But this is just insultingly shitty work. And so my first game plan is to write out the schematic of what they're actually doing as it is now. And that will tell me where I can add gain, etc., as necessary to get this amp a little bit deeper reverb. And then in that process, I will also be, there's nothing wrong intrinsically with using this cap here, though an axial has better support for such a long span. But this shit, and this, there's no excuse. So this is all going to get cleaned up and certain areas redone. I'm not a huge fan of Dr. Z factory stuff, but that's what the factory looks like compared to that nonsense. So I predict a happy ending for this amp. I just don't know how much work it's going to take to get it there. Okay, all the work is done in this Dr. Z, and I got all the yucky work replaced with good stuff and cleaned up. Now, the reason, besides the fact that this thing had been butchered, that the reverb was so weak in this amp, is that Dr. Z was had the tone stack going to the master volume, and the output of the master volume going to the reverb send. And after the mixer, it was going to a passive effects loop, then to the phase inverter. Well, that's not where you want to feed the reverb from, because that means as the master volume is turned down, the reverb is fed a weaker signal. You want to have the reverb to signal ratio the same regardless of the master volume setting. And you really want to have a master volume after any effects loop, so that all the levels being sent to your effects are consistent. And the only thing that changes is how loud you listen to all that. So I fed the reverb from the wiper of the volume, the treble pot, which is a much better place to take the split. I changed some of the values in the reverb circuit to give it still more depth. And then after the reverb mixer, it then goes to an active effects loop. This is the Metro Amps zero loss effects loop, which is quite good. Low impedance buffer output, all that fun stuff, bypassable. The now unused original send jack is now a foot switch for a little bit of a mid-range boost, which I will show. That's just justifying the chassis hole. And then from the output of the effects loop, that's when it goes to the master volume, and the output of the master volume goes to the phase inverter. So this is a much better sounding system in terms of signal to noise and getting all the levels how they ought to be. Also undid all the damage that previous hacks had done into the tremolo circuit, and changed the values to be much more like a Gibson GA18T, which is a great sounding cathode bias wiggle tremolo. So you'll get a chance to hear it next. So this is that Dr. Z JAZ 2040 now with the changes made. The tremolo works a lot better. It stops stopping at higher speeds. The mid-range pot is much more responsive. The reverb actually does things now. Added an effects loop, added a mid-range boost. So let me show you everything real quick. So reverb. Mid-range boost. Mid-range pipe. Tremolo. I don't have it hooked up, but that foot switch, that foot switch is now without any popping. So let me reconnect the effects loop stuff and show you that. All right, so this is without the effects loop engaged. All right, so here's the effects loop switched on with the TC delay in the loop. All right, so now it's got a tremolo that works as advertised, reverb that works as advertised, a mid-range pipe that does things you want it to do, a mid-range boost that can be useful as opposed to just an all or nothing thing, an actual good sounding effects loop, thanks George, as opposed to a passive loop, which is just an invitation for disappointment. So I hope the owner will be very, very happy.